Hello. Today I want to talk about how surrender to God changes in different states of consciousness. Here in the relative field in our universe, the state of consciousness is waking, dreaming, or sleeping. These are the states of consciousness that we experience the relative field with. We are either awake, or we are sleeping, or we are dreaming. When one wants to surrender to God with the consciousness of the relative field, with the waking consciousness, this surrender is a thought alone. This surrender cannot reach the Lord. This thought is covered by all the activity here in the relative field. So to surrender to God with the waking consciousness is covered and hidden. When you have a meditation practice that transcends the relative field, that transcends this universe, the infinity of universes, and your mind, then the consciousness is self-consciousness. Self-consciousness that is pure consciousness, that is divine being. To transcend the relative field is to surrender the relative field, to surrender your mind to the Lord. To hold pure consciousness, self-consciousness, is the surrendering of the relative field to God. Now, the Lord receives the surrender. The Lord knows the surrender. It is no longer hidden or covered, this act of surrendering. So in the state of self-consciousness or pure consciousness that is held in a meditation practice when the relative field is transcended, this state of self-consciousness is surrender to God. But it is temporary. When you return to the consciousness of the relative field, to waking, dreaming, or sleeping, then the consciousness of self is no longer held. The consciousness of self that is the transcendent is no longer held. In time, however, with repeated and regular transcending, the consciousness of self is then held alongside the consciousness of the relative field. Your mind is so transformed by your meditation practice that it rises to that status of self. Now, two states of consciousness are held simultaneously. Pure consciousness, the consciousness of self, alongside the consciousness of the relative field, the waking, the dreaming, or the sleeping. Now, surrender of the relative field to God is permanent. Union with divine being that is yourself is permanent. But the surrendering to the Lord continues to evolve. When established in the self, where you hold self-consciousness alongside waking, dreaming, or sleeping, when established in the self, then the personal God, your personal God, begins to draw you to themselves. Your practice is now a practice of devotion to your personal God, surrendering to your personal God. Your personal God might be Buddha or Christ or Krishna or Maharishi or any other fully realized human being. Now your personal God draws you to themselves, and you surrender the finest celestial values of the relative field to your God. Your perceptions of the relative field are perceptions of your personal God made manifest in the created world. Your perceptions of the relative field are the finest celestial perceptions of your personal God made manifest here in your life. There is a final act of surrender as your consciousness continues to develop. God consciousness is the consciousness of self held alongside the consciousness of the most celestial relative values. In time, God consciousness evolves to unity consciousness, or Brahmi Chaitana. All beings are held in the self, but the final act of surrender is of the self to one's personal God. One's personal God rises to that status of Brahm. This is Brahmi Chaitana, unity consciousness, totality consciousness. The surrender of one's self with all beings held within to one's personal God is Brahmi Chaitana. One knows Brahm. One knows totality. And the knower of Brahm is Brahm. Thank you, beloved Guru. All glory be to thee.